Hey, what's up everybody? It's Lids, and we're back for some more Gwent, and today we are playing the first ever deck that got us to Pro rank. I'm excited, so let's go give it a look. So today we'll be playing a Scoia'Tael Mahakam Forged Dwarves deck that was originally a deck that I was using to farm Winter Cycle quests, until I realized it was strong enough to push for Pro rank. In round 1 we have a few potential win conditions, including starting with the Dwarven Chariot in the range row to get a couple of rowdy dwarves on the board, and then using Munro to convert those rowdy dwarves into Dwarf Berserkers for lots of damage, and then once our opponent plays enough units, using Zoltan Warrior to deal damage and get even more rowdy dwarves, which Munro can then convert into more Dwarf Berserkers for even more damage. But if you don't get enough of those key cards, then an alternative strategy we can use in round 1 is to stack armor with either a range or even melee row Dwarven Chariot, Wagenburgs, and Miners, all giving armor to either Xavier, a Dwarf Berserker, a melee row Dwarven Chariot, or whatever happens to be stacking the most armor. Then with a combination of Mahakam Marauder and or Dennis, we can turn that armor into boosts, giving us tons of extra value. The Zoltan and Munro approach is generally more effective, but stacking armor to get a bunch of boosts at the end can often catch your opponents off guard, so don't rule that out either. Then we are really good at either defending against the bleed or doing the bleeding in round 2 because we have resilience coming from Mahakam Pass and or Zoltan Chivay. Then in round 2 or round 3, we want to get a lot of dwarves on the board quickly, using cards like Zoltan's Company, Range Row Dwarven Chariots if we still have them, or even Zoltan Warrior. If you still have Munro, you can then convert those rowdy dwarves into Dwarf Berserkers, but that's not strictly necessary, because once we get Figgis down in that row with all the dwarves, we'll play Brouver to boost all those dwarves, giving us a super powerful engine. Then if we still have time, we'll use Range Row Zoltan Scoundrel to boost all those dwarves, and Barclay to boost them again. So those are the key things that we're trying to do with this deck, and in general I found that when I pushed aggressively early in round 1 and even round 2, that's when I had the most success, because this deck can do well against control because we go fairly wide, and damage because we have armor, but in a long round 3 against greedy boosting decks, we can get outscored. So by extending the length of round 1 and or round 2, we can avoid putting ourselves in that situation, increasing our chances of winning. Alternatively, you could drop Xavier, Tempering, and Pyrotechnician in exchange for a couple of Mahakam Volunteers and Armor's Workshop if you want a little more consistency. And as I said, this was the first deck to ever get me into Pro rank, but it was originally intended as a Winter Cycle quest farming deck, so you can certainly use it for that as well. And now, let's go see it in action. Alright, so going up against Nilfgaard here, and we'll go first. Alright, so it's Imprisonment, so presumably this is going to be a status spam type of opponent, which generally we do relatively okay against because we can go fairly wide, which is usually something that control decks struggle against a bit. So having a Dwarven Chariot to start things off with is good. Brouver will be our round 3 win condition, however, we're still looking for a round 1 finisher or 2. We have some armor stacking potential, but that's not really good enough. Okay, Dennis does work with armor stacking, so suddenly that's looking much better. You could be the card that we throw the extra armor on, or it could be you. I think this can work, but maybe we could have used you as well, because you also stack armor. And obviously, though, Call the Force gives us a lot of flexibility. So let's start with Dwarven Chariot, because that can be a way to give ourselves extra armor on a card. I'm debating whether to boost it with Tactical Advantage or not, because I'm anticipating this will get locked one way or another. So I think we leave it there. So basically, the strategy in round 1 is likely to be... Oh, Helga, I did not expect for that to be what you were going with. Okay, well, yes, it is lock. It's not the kind of lock I expected, but it is lock. So yeah, our strategy here is basically stack a whole bunch of armor, which actually, we would hope, would do fairly well against Helga. Now this is looking more like a tactics deck rather than a status spam deck, but then convert that armor into boosts using Dennis as our finisher. So we could go for another Dwarven Chariot, although I would kind of like to be a little bit protective of those at this stage. Let's go Miner. That is another way to give ourselves extra armor, and I am going to give the tactical advantage to you because otherwise, between Helga and whatever tactic you're about to play, presumably, you can remove. But then again, battle stations, you do anything you want. That card is so unbelievably busted, because, you're going to play that, then you're going to play Maddie Division, which allows you to play another card. Then you're going to go Justice System Form, which allows you to play another card. Really? Boohurt. Okay. A little surprised there. I mean, it's clear now what they're going for, but I did not expect it. I mean, some form of toll removal on this miner is incoming, or Master of Puppets, but I did not expect that from Imprisonment. Question now is, can we be quick enough with you to still get the armor that we're looking for? Oh, and in truth, I think we might have wanted that Wagenburg after all, because I think I was acting on the assumption that we had one more armor stacking card. It could actually have Zoltan be the recipient of the armor. Yeah, we have lots of potential recipients of that armor. Not great ways to give more of it, unless we use this other Dwarven Chariot, but I would like to save that so we have set up for Brouver for round 3, because we don't have Zoltan's company in hand right now. So let's go with Dwarf Berserker here. I would normally put you next to you, so we could potentially go with Dennis there, but I'm suspicious of potential treason since they're more of a tactics deck than we had initially thought they might be. Obviously, I didn't use this because I don't think the Dwarf Berserker is the preferred target. It is a potential target, but not the preferred target for that order, so that is also a little bit risky, of course. Okay, another Magni Division, another Brouver. Okay, so yes, clearly they have some intention to get rid of this miner with some automatic removal or swapping power, stealing it altogether. So at this stage, we're basically just going through potential armor recipients, so Pyrotechnician potentially being one, and Zoltan being another. Obviously, this is the most valuable of those potential targets, and therefore the one we would be most concerned about potentially getting answered, but we could go for that here if we really wanted to. Okay, this is going to play into treason a little bit. I'm going to put Zoltan down. I'm going to give the armor back to you, which does mean you're obviously going to spend some of that armor right now. But that means we could go Dennis next turn in between these two. And that'd probably be the last card we'd want to play in this round. Yeah, there's real... Oh! On Zoltan instead of the miner. I mean, that might have been their intended way to deal with the miner. But that does, because of the armor more than anything, suddenly make Dennis a lot less intriguing. Yeah, we have a little bit of damage on the Dwarven Skirmisher, but it's not really reason enough to keep playing here, because the armor into boosts is not really our preferred round 1 win condition. We almost found a way to make it work, but ultimately I think it's best if we just end this round early. Okay, so we are on even cards here. They may very well look to push aggressively. Usually we do very well if our opponents do try to push aggressively. Wagenburg at this stage, I mean, yes, it is potential setup for Dennis. It does sustain the Dwarf Berserker, which is useful. Could help out the Pyrotechnician as well, so we do still have potential targets for Dennis, but at this point, we would like to see more of the golds and less of the bronzes, so I think maybe we dump Pyrotechnician. Xavier is another potential armor recipient, but perhaps a little bit of a stronger one. Still looking for... Okay, yeah, Munro or Zoltan. The other Zoltan, that is. Okay, Imperial Diplomacy might just be a throwaway. We'll see what they end up getting here. A trap. Oh. Okay. I was gonna say, when our opponents try to bleed us in round 2, I do kind of like to use Xavier. So he's relatively flexible. He's not a critically important card for us, so it doesn't feel terrible to commit him here. But if they do continue to push, then obviously he's an engine who continues to grow. Given how they played a trap, though, yes, he probably can survive that, but I'm kind of thinking Dwarven Chariot is the way to go here, because even if the Chariot itself takes the hit, we still get the 2 dwarves here. Okay, so that's what I expected. We get the 2 dwarves here, which is actually the main reason why I wanted to do that, because then we can go Munro. Although I don't want to play him unless and until it becomes clearer that they are actually trying to push aggressively in this round, because obviously this is a very good card. Artorias Vigo, though, is a very good card of their own, so I think we will go for it here. And they're going to probably try to remove one of these with a tactic. Well, War Council, okay, I mean, that's great, of course, for carryover purposes, and we would like to get our Mahakam Pass down as well, but tempo-wise, we need to be a little bit careful. See how much tempo they get here. So we do need to keep pace. And the armor is annoying, because we are gonna look to get some extra damage from the Rowdy Dwarves with Munro, and they very well may lock Munro with their last leader ability charge or other cards from their hand, but that's maybe not a terrible thing, because we do still have other engines that we would like to have not get locked, like we might play Xavier after that. Xavier would not be enough tempo, not quite enough tempo, so I think for that reason it is going to be Munro here. And do this again just to avoid the treason. Naturally, you hit the enemy that has armor. Slave driver for another Magni division. For another tactic. They're gonna steal you. That is actually pretty annoying. So that means Munro no longer has targets to convert into Dwarf Berserkers. However, I mean, we could use this to... It would ideally be Figgis to help protect Brouver, especially because they still have a leader ability charge, so Brouver, as of right now, would immediately get answered if we did not have a defender down. But we could get Zoltan. We have several potential Zoltan targets, and then that gives us ways to set up Munro. So I think we might have to do that. Given how aggressively they're pushing here. This also helps give us a lot of tempo. So what's our preferred stuff? We hit you, and then probably you, because the Rowdy Dwarf doesn't make that much of a difference for us. Do this. So this is what we ideally wanted to do in round 1, for what it's worth. The good thing about this is that now we've gone wide enough with several different potential threats that it is difficult for them to answer them all in one turn, but with leader ability, it is possible. Munro has almost done everything that we could have asked him to do, so not a huge deal for us to lose him at this stage. Assassination... Okay, you have to get rid of the armor on Zoltan, so he's no longer dealing damage every turn. We are still out-tempoing them, though, at this stage, so this might be a good time for us to sneak in Xavier so that we don't potentially get stuck playing him on our last turn in this round if they push really hard. So we still have some time to generate some value on him. I will put him on the end, though. Even if they have another assassination, he can still survive it, and because he will regain armor once we play subsequent dwarves, we'll still be okay. Would like to get a Mahakam Pass down. That would definitely be our preferred next play, I think. Stefan. Yikes. Alright, this is getting a little BM at this point. Okay, but as I was saying, Xavier will regain the armor, and that will turn him back into an engine. This might be their last turn that they're going to play in this round, because they are using the War Council. But that means they are using War Council for tempo, not for carryover, for whatever that's worth. Let's go Mahakam Pass here, though. I mean, we basically need 9 points of value from this. Is that possible? I mean, we'll get armor back on Xavier when we play a dwarf, so that's going to be 1 point. It's going to be close. It might be tricky. We might need to use a leader ability charge here. Except Mahakam Guard is absolutely fantastic. The Giant Slayer can threaten additional carryover, which would be really nice, but I think we're going to have to settle for maybe just the Mahakam Pass order ability and just that. So this is pretty sweet. So let's put you not on the... I mean, you do have armor, so we could put you on the end, I suppose. We'll put you here, though, next to some weaker units, so that way, if they do try to treason, it's not going to be as effective. Okay, it's bribery. They're still going. It's Zoltan. Now they are getting additional carryover. But they don't have as good boosting setup, because they only had one dwarf. It does, of course, though, proc the Assimilate on Vigo. But they didn't score that many points in that turn, and now Xavier is once again an engine, which means I think we have just enough power if we go Dwarf Berserker. We put that next to the Mahakam Guard so that if they continue to push, we can go with Dennis in between those two, and if we need a bunch of extra points, we could use Mahakam Forge, our leader, and or Mahakam Pass to get temperings and give ourselves more armor to make the Dennis play even more of a point slam, but that might not be necessary. I was going to say that I was calculating based on us hitting a unit that did not have armor, but they do have some armor. Fortunately, we do have the boost from Xavier as well, so even with that being said, we do have enough points here, even if we were to pass immediately. Okay, I don't like False Siri. I definitely don't like False Siri filling our row in particular, because now that means we can no longer use Dennis, which was going to be our preferred play for this turn. Granted, Barclay is best to finish when we have a lot of dwarves on the board, so at this rate we're going to have a very short round 3, so he wasn't going to be good then. We might as well play him now. So that's not a huge loss. Obviously, Siri going over to their side, presumably on the next turn though, that is going to be a big point swing for them. So now we do have our dwarves once again dealing damage, so that is nice. At the moment, this is enough tempo. Once Siri goes over, which might happen on this turn, that will of course change. Imperial Diplomacy. It's a Dwarven Mercenary, which What? Oh, it's a 7. Wow. Yes, because I think this is, what's it called? The Toussaint wine to give a huge boost to Ciri, Purifier, have her come over to their side. And that does still mess us up from a row space standpoint. I think it has to be Dennis. Brouver is a pretty huge waste at this stage. We're probably going to need to play him on our last turn. But I think we go Mahakam Pass on Barclay so we get at least a little more value on Dennis. Question is, do we also need to use our leader ability as well? Because this is going to be a pretty huge point swing for them. But bear in mind, Brouver should be pretty big as well. So I don't know. I don't know how the math lines up here. It might be close. Okay, well, it was a tactic, presumably, because Dwarven Mercenary did not take damage, or at least it wasn't a unit. But they did not have a way for Ciri to get back over to their side of the board. Need to be careful here. She will be 1 point away from getting boosted enough to go over. So we will defend the bleed in round 2. Okay, and this actually works really well for us, because if we go Zoltan's Company, we can get great wide setup for Brouver. They no longer have any leader ability charges, so they might not have many ways to answer Brouver, although we probably prefer to get Figgis down first anyway. It's going to be a little bit less points, because it means we're going to delay Brouver by 1 more turn, but I think we're going to have to deal with that. They did get a little bit of carryover on Zoltan, but they've used all their leader ability charges, whereas we still do have ours. Zoltan is not a bad finisher either. Okay, so I think this is about, yeah, it's definitely as good as it gets. So we'll roll with this. And I think, let's go Zoltan's Company first, because there's always the chance that Figgis will get answered as soon as we play him, so I think we wait 1 turn before we drop Figgis. Let's do this. Okay, Brothans, they're probably gonna put a spy in the melee row just to annoy us. Should still have room. Should still have room, and, I mean, granted, if we'd gone Figgis turn 1, they wouldn't have had anything to target with Duchess's Informant, but it's not like a Rowdy Dwarf is making a huge difference for them anyway. So now we'll go Figgis. Deliberately putting you, well, next to small stuff, not that there is anything big, but again, in case of treason. Next turn will be Brouver, and that means not a lot of time for Brouver to do his thing, but we're wide enough that barring some other thing that they do to seriously punish us for going wide, we should still be able to get a lot of value out of that. Nazca Sergeant is, of course, a big point slam, but I think Brouver should be bigger still. Okay. Now we go Brouver. And not a ton of armor on him, but we can use Mahakam Forge on a subsequent turn if we'd like to. Granted, he is going to have enough to boost for both of our remaining turns. Everything except for this Duchess's Informant will receive a boost. Slave Driver for more Nazca Sergeants. Incredibly creative. And by that I mean extremely uncreative. Okay, so now it's Zoltan Scoundrel, which, I mean, if they hadn't used Duchess's Informant, I mean, I guess you could almost make the case for going melee row here. You get both Zoltan Scoundrel and Eudora in the melee row for more boost for Brouver, but now we go range row because there's so much stuff for us to boost. It's definitely preferable. So we'll do this. Boost ourselves. And then Mahakam Forge. I think we're gonna boost one of the Rowdy Dwarves just to play this safe. That will get you up to 9. Technically, if it were Igni, they would hit both, but alright. They realize at this point they cannot stop us, so they'll forfeit. So that's a good example of how this deck does really well defending the bleed in round 2 and succeeding in a short round 3. Alright, so going up against Nilfgaard here, and they'll go first. Okay, so we can use Zoltan Warrior as one of our key win conditions in this round. Maybe a Dwarven Chariot with Dwarf Berserker or even Wagenburg to help give these guys the armor to keep continuing to be engines. Dennis Cranmer can also be a finisher if we need him to be, especially because we do have some of that armor stacking. I think Pyrotechnician, maybe we can go without you. Wagenburg, okay, so definitely armor stacking. So yes, Dennis does have some potential as well. Okay. So you're in Imperial formation, which of course means, presumably, soldiers. However, Alba Pikeman makes it a little unclear if this is pure soldiers or if there's going to be some status spam in here as well. The fact that they flip the Lampkin immediately is actually extremely useful, because that means we could go turn 1 Zoltan Warrior, which I am kind of tempted to do. If they are status spam, then of course perhaps Zoltan will be answered, but since he goes relatively wide, I think that's still not a terrible thing to do, and obviously the earlier we play him, the more time he has to deal damage, and might even get rid of that pikeman. He does. Okay. Light cavalry will remove the armor on Zoltan. However, we have several ways to deal with that. We could put a Wagenburg next to Zoltan, give him armor so that he's then returning the favor, potentially at least. Or Dwarven Chariot would be a little bit slower because it doesn't have Zeal, so we'd have to wait a turn before we get armor on Zoltan. I'm anticipating they might be about to play a second Light Cavalry, in which case that would break through the Wagenburg's armor, but then we could Dwarven Chariot on our next turn and give armor to the Wagenburg, so, you know, it depends a little bit. We don't know exactly what they're going to go for here, but let's do this. And I deliberately put it on the left side of Zoltan so he would get the armor before he deals his damage. So we do still get the barricade effect. Remove the armor on the light cavalry. Obviously, they could use Imperial formation to get it back, though. And yep, it is exactly as I anticipated. And they will do exactly what I just said. So now this Wagenburg is armorless. However, we could play our other Wagenburg to immediately get armor on this if we really wanted to. And although that might seem like a low-tempo, not very valuable play, it does stack a lot of armor. And when we have Dennis, stacking armor can turn into points very quickly. So it's not a terrible idea. I think we go for it. Okay, they are getting very frustrated by our... What? Armor? Excuse me? That was a little bit confusing. So they did have enough damage to remove the armor on this Wagenburg. This Wagenburg will add armor back onto it. However, that's not going to happen until after the game checks for whether this has armor. So this is not going to give armor. This will. We would ideally like to put the Dwarven Chariot in between these two, but that doesn't yet work very well. I'm thinking we might go melee row, Dwarven Chariot, where it gets more armor, and then on a subsequent turn, we can use this as another way to stack even more armor, hopefully on a Dwarf Berserker that we put in between these two. That way it becomes the armor recipient, and that's where we get the Dennis value if we want to go in that direction. So let's do this. Okay, Sterling Soldier. So yeah, I think they're pretty much just trying to wait this round out, stall a bit. That's why they just didn't even bother. I mean, that's weird that they didn't play this in the melee row, of course. Don't get me wrong. But now that these both have armor, that means we can squeeze you in here. And we're going to load up on as much armor on you as we can possibly get. Renfri's gang. We are learning more about their deck. Okay, so admittedly though, given these light cavalry continue to poke us, it means we kind of would need to stall another turn before Dennis becomes all that meaningful. So what we might even do is we could Mahakam Pass here and set ourselves up, especially since we're on red coin. We are potentially on pace to, well, I mean, they did just put a bunch of tempo on the board. So we might be able to win on even and then push aggressively in round 2, in which case the carryover from Mahakam Pass is meaningful. I think we go for this. Especially if we can get, okay, no, I was going to say, the one that gets boosted based on how many dwarves we have in a row would have been perfect. But we could do this. You will have 4 armor. We do this, you'll get 5 armor. We do that. You will still be armored, even after you take the damage from the light cavalry, which means we are threatening resilience here. Lightmaker, yes. I mean, they're just doing a whole bunch of thinning stuff here at the moment. Fortunately, we did not really care about that card receiving damage. So we could pass now. We would lose the round, however, we would do so with a resilience unit, because this is about to gain resilience, and then we wouldn't need to play anything in the next round. It does mean that, yeah, unfortunately, Mahakam Pass probably wouldn't be doing too much for us in that case. I mean, unless they tried to push when we have a unit already on the board and Mahakam Pass. Otherwise, we go Dwarven Chariot, give ourselves more armor, and We have just enough room to squeeze a Dennis in here somewhere. I think we take our chances passing now, because this is now a pretty large deficit that we're looking at. We get the resilience at the very least. Okay, so we, if they drive past, don't need to play anything at all. So don't really think we're looking for too many throwaway cards here. They might try to push. They're in a really tough spot where if they do try to push, we're going to have a card already on the board in the Mahakam Pass as well. So we do have an advantage in that way, but if they don't do anything, then we're going to have card advantage. If they try to push further, Zoltan would be a great way to defend against the bleed. I think we dump you, though. So they're in kind of a lose-lose situation here. I'm thinking, rather than guarantee they go a card down in round 3, they're going to at least try to push a little bit here. See what they can do in that regard. Okay, what did they just discard? It was Iris. Not so surprisingly, with Iris's companions. So it wasn't a lot of tempo, but it is carryover. Granted, they don't have a lot of cards in their deck, so it's not like they're getting a ton of value from Iris. So I think what we do is we go Dwarf Berserker. Since that is an engine, we don't want to get stuck with that as one of our last plays. We played early. It is still enough tempo, and it has time to get decent value. Unicorn. Oh, I hate the unicorn combo, man. I swear. I've never seen anyone brick this combo. Granted, that's probably because people don't play the combo when they brick it, but you know what I mean. Okay, and now we could go... I was going to say, we're potentially setting ourselves up for Dennis as a finisher for this round. We could potentially still do that if we go Minor to put armor back on Dwarf Berserker, but it is not as good as it once looked to be. I think we'll do this, and then we'll probably use Mahakam Pass on the Dwarf Berserker, since we're losing Mahakam Pass in round 3 anyway, so there's no point in saving that, and the earlier we do this, the more time we have to get value from that, and it does mean that now, even if we were to pass on this turn, we would still have enough points. Okay, Rune Mage. It's a Nilfgaard Runestone. Ooh. No! We just needed that to live one more turn, and then, along with Zoltan, would have given us a lot of armor to set up Dennis. I mean, Zoltan is still 5 armor, which is not bad, but add on the additional armor from that order ability, and we would have had a pretty decent Dennis. So I think it probably is still time for Zoltan, and then next turn might end up being Dennis if they continue to push, and at that point, we're somewhat wide in the melee row, since we will get Eudora from Zoltan, so we could potentially Zoltan Scoundrel at that stage if we'd like to, depending on how they react to this. Because now we are threatening not only card advantage, but even more carryover. So they'll pass. They'll settle for that, so we will have an extra unit and card advantage going into round 3. And what we're really looking for here is Zoltan's company to set up Brouver. We can get Brouver with Call to Force, but we'd like to see a Figgis here, ideally. Or Brouver. Okay, we don't get him. Okay, so the risk there being, of course, that Brouver could get immediately answered in that case. The good thing is that Brouver, since he goes wide, even if he individually gets answered, we still get decent value on all the other dwarves in that row. So I think, especially given how we have some concerns about Brouver, let's start with Xavier. Maybe he can be some removal bait. So we're not too concerned about how much value we get out of him. Although he could be a decent card to stack armor on for Dennis. A Nazca Sergeant, it's not going to deal damage, so they're just going to try to point slam their way through. Or at least at the moment, that's what it looks like. Which, obviously, the earlier we pull the trigger on Zoltan's company plus Brouver, the more points it's worth. So if we don't think they have enough control to shut that down, then we should do it soon. But I still think we want to play it a little bit cautiously at this stage. So maybe we go Minor, and with that, we can stack more armor, either get armor on Zoltan so that he gets boosted from Brouver when we play him, or use it on Brouver to make Brouver harder to remove, and or just do more boosting. So let's do this. Okay, more Nazca Sergeants. So although those are solid point slams... Oh, and we... right, they're Renfri. They're Renfri deck. Okay. That actually wait. Wait a second. Oh, okay. That was coming from Rune Mage. I was like, why special cards? What the heck? Presumably, they're going to play Renfri relatively soon, which would perhaps be the biggest threat to Brouver. The threshold for the Renfri destroying ability is an 8 power unit, isn't it? So we'd want to have at least Brouver up to 8 points when we play him. Let's use Zoltan's Company now. Let's do that now. And I'm going to use this on Zoltan. Why did our miner not have armor? I saw that in our hand that it didn't have armor, and that seemed very strange to me. I don't know why that happened. It's from our starting deck. It should be guaranteed to get 1 armor. Did I? I don't know. Maybe I missed something. There is Renfri, as anticipated. So we want to see what this is. They could use, if they get the remove an 8 power unit ability, they could use that on Xavier. We're actually a little bit strapped for space in the melee row, because obviously Brouver wants to go there, and that would mean the row is full at that point, and that means that Dennis doesn't really have space. Okay, that's exactly what they get. It's Curse of Pride, so the question is, will they use that right now on Xavier, and if so, do we feel comfortable using Brouver on our next turn? I think we will, because even if they do answer him immediately, at least in that case, we have enough dwarves with armor on the board that will get enough boosts that it'll be still decent value. Obviously, if he goes unanswered, even better. They don't use it, though. They don't use it, though. At the end of the turn, if it's not... Okay, well, that kind of incentivizes them to wait. So, I think we act on the assumption that they're going to use this, which will remove one of the units in this melee row, which is going to create space for Dennis. So Dennis might need to be our last play. We go Brouver now. Brouver will boost himself up to 7, so we'll probably want to use Leader. We know that we strongly suspect they don't have Heat Wave, given how they're Renfri. They could still have Vilgefortz would probably be the biggest threat, but as we said before, even in that case, that may still be okay, because Brouver will still give half-decent value. Okay, so I'm going to put you here. Yeah, so you're going to boost yourself actually up to 8. So I am going to boost you, which means it is going to make you a better target for a Vilgefortz or whatever other tall removal they might have from units. But given how many armored dwarf, lock. But given how many other armored dwarves we had in that row, I think that's still half-decent value. So we're acting on the assumption that this Curse of Pride is going to create space for Dennis. And maybe we wanted to put you next to Zoltan and Xavier, just for the better armor pocket, but I think it's going to be in between these two where Dennis ends up going. So now let's go Zoltan, Scoundrel, Pyrotechnician, either one on this turn, because we have a full melee row. Maybe we'll do this, and they have a lot of armor, so Pyrotechnician might not be doing too much. Might just leave that order unused, to be honest. Nausicaa Sergeant again. It's another solid point slam. Oh, yeah, they're going to use it. Okay, that's a little bit unfortunate. For reasons they may not understand, but that was exactly 8 points, so I guess it was the best target they're going to get from Curse of Pride. So Dennis, I think we still wait on him. I think what we'll do is we'll go Pyrotechnician here. Oh, no, but we can't do that, otherwise we lose space for Dennis. Okay, so it has to be this, I was going to say, otherwise we can at least put somebody else with a lot of armor next to one of these other highly armored cards. But yeah, Dennis is not going to be that big, but we do still have a 7-point lead here. It is Vilgefortz, as I suspected it would be. Okay, so Dennis is enough, and actually this gives us a way to get more armor, so that's useful. We'll do it on Brouver. Go there, and we'll take the win. Alright, so going up against Skellige here, and they'll go first. And let's dump the tempering. Do have a lot of armor stacking here, but we'd love to see Dennis to go along with that, or something to do with our rowdy dwarves, like a Munro to convert them. But we do have Mahakam Marauder can actually be a finisher for us for armor stacking, so that's not terrible. Let's dump the Skirmisher then. Pyrotechnician, also not really a card we want to be seeing. Okay, well, Naval Supremacy, it'll give them a ship. We'll go for the long ship, which is probably the best option for them. However, the damage they're dealing with this, we're going to basically tank it all with our armor, which is very useful. Although, combine that with the longship as well, and maybe it is best if we play something like, say, Pyrotechnician that has several points of armor here. Otherwise, Dwarven Chariot can obviously give us more armor, as could Wagenburg long term, but I don't really want those to be taking too many hits. So I think it is Pyrotechnician, at least initially. Okay, Smuggler. We'll get another one. Unfortunately, that really is arguably the best card they could have played, because if they played anything else, they would have had only one additional unit. It means even if we were willing to sacrifice the Pyrotechnician, which I was ready to do, we had a decent chance of getting rid of the longship, but now it's only a 1 in 3 chance. So Dwarf Berserker would be the next best card at tanking the hits from both longship and the naval supremacy. So I was kind of thinking that was coming next. Otherwise, you go Wagenburg. It does survive the hit with still 1 point of armor. It can still use its barricade ability then, but it's not going to be able to do much beyond that if it does get hit once more. So okay, we're gonna try to sneak that in. Might even go double Wagenburg. Give ourselves some serious armor. Okay, but a boardage does work. Yeah. Yeah, this is just not really going the way we want this to be going right now. We kind of had a way to play around the naval supremacy, yes, but in the grand scheme of things, that alone is obviously not enough for us to win the round. We just didn't have the... I guess Marauder could be a finisher for us, but that's just not going to make up the difference here, I don't think. Now that they have Holger in addition to the longship, that's overkill. That was not necessary. So I am fine with them doing what I would say is wasting a leader ability charge. And we could play our other Wagenburg and give this Wagenburg armor, which means we, once again, are back to stacking a bunch of armor. So, I mean, it gives us the option, I suppose. It does give us the option of still trying to build a wall to block all of their incoming damage. And we could put this Dwarf Berserker in between these two Wagenburgers if we want. That is, if they don't mess with them further. But they did. I mean, they haven't put up that many points, so it's not like they are totally impossible to catch here. If we had still maintained two Wagenburgs next to each other and been able to stack a bunch of armor on this Dwarf Berserker, then we would have a good way to set up the Marauder, and that probably would have been our ideal way to make it happen. I mean, we could go melee road Dwarven Chariot for what it's worth. That way it would gain some armor. That might not be a terrible idea. That's just an armor engine. This is still a damage engine, so I think we prioritize getting you down first, and then next turn might be Dwarven Chariot. Okay, deranged Corsair. They really don't like our armor. They really don't like our... Oh, this got hit one more time. This one last time, we'd be totally fine. So we would still have armor engines, but that is no longer the case. We go melee road Dwarven Chariot. We use this to give armor to Wagenburg. It is technically still possible. We are kind of asking for them to just activate this Cataclysm and cause even more trouble. So is it worth it? I think we can still potentially make this work. If they were to pass here, we could certainly still catch them. Smuggler, I mean, it's not a huge play, but they're just going to get rid of the Wagenburg altogether at this point. So we could use this to give armor to the Dwarf Berserker. That way it is still dealing damage every turn. We could put you in the melee row as well. That way you're still tanking hits from the naval supremacy. And you can eventually also give armor to the Dwarf Berserker. But at this point, we are not going to be able to stack enough armor for the Mahakam Marauder to be a meaningful finisher for us. So I think this is where we draw the line. So that, of course, means they'll win round one. Okay, and they did play one more card than us, but of course they may still try to push a bit in round two. If so, we can use Xavier as a pseudo throwaway potential engine if they do try to push further. Dwarven Skirmisher, I think we can do better than that. Mahakam Pass is, of course, the ideal card, especially if they dry pass. That gives us some carryover. Zoltan's Company does give us potential to set up with Zoltan Scoundrel and Barclay. Figgis, and we can go wide with the Dwarven Chariot as well. Okay, well, Figgis doesn't really have anything super meaningful to defend. Don't think we have that much armor stacking at this point, and Dennis would have been our other armor finisher. We could still go Xavier and Dwarven Chariot for armor if we needed to, but they will dry pass, so that means great opportunity for us to go with Mahakam Pass, and I do believe, for what it's worth, that they still have naval supremacy dealing damage here, so whatever we have will get hit. Not that it's going to make a huge difference, so we also get extra armor from this Mahakam Pass, so we will be fine. And we'll get this carryover. Okay, so we did not see many of our big cards in round 1, which means we still have several in round 3. Namely, Zoltan Warrior and Call the Force to get us Brouver. We also have Munro. If we could get one of those two in hand, then we could... Yes! Now use this to get Munro. Okay, perfect. That's actually... I mean, that's potentially amazing, but Brouver plus Munro is a little bit tricky since that's a lot of stuff we're trying to do with our rowdy dwarves, and we need to do that quickly, which means Xavier's going to be a little bit awkward to fit in here, and we're going to have a lot of things going on in that row. So what we could do, because I believe they have one charge remaining of naval supremacy, which is annoying because although we wouldn't take damage, we would like for our units to maintain their armor. That's really important for Brouver. So I think we go Zoltan's company here, because then we're unaffected, and that means that they are going to take that last point of damage instead. So I'm expecting for this to probably be the scenario as their win condition for round 3. There it is. So the tricky thing here is that this Drakkar is going to absolutely demolish Figgis. On the other hand, you could make the case, well, that's kind of what Figgis is here for. So we either go Figgis here, or we go Call the Force into Munro. Maybe we do still go with Figgis. Oh, and unfortunately, yeah, he is still taking the damage from that last charge of their naval supremacy since this was summoned in. Yeah, now with leader ability, they can practically get rid of it already. And assuming that we take damage from that... Okay, no, Figgis survives. And usually, we'd be concerned about losing armor on our rowdy dwarves, because that means that Brouver no longer gives those guys boosts. However, assuming that we use Munro on this turn, which is the plan, then we will convert the ones that don't have armor into Dwarf Berserkers, and then they suddenly do have armor. And we might even play Munro in the range row here, because we've so much rowdy dwarf potential with Zoltan Warrior as well, that we are gonna see this row get extremely crowded. So let's do this. Let's do this. Let's do this. It obviously means he's not protected by the defender. But now they have to choose which one to go after. And let's be honest, Figgis was not really defending against much with just 2 power and the infusion here. And Boardage, they're probably going to use on you. Oh, and not enough damaged units to get the extra card out, and perhaps for that reason, they'll forfeit. So we didn't even need to use Zoltan to create additional rowdy dwarves, or Brouver to boost those dwarves. So there's a look at a pro-rank viable Scoia'Tael Dwarves deck, and given how, as I said recently, I'm looking to step away from Gwent soon, and making it to pro-rank was my last big goal, this will be my last deck guide. But thank you all so much for all of your support over the years, for all the various decks that we've made in all the various events, and although I may be stepping away from Gwent, I've made playlists for all of our previous decks, specific for each seasonal event, and especially given how, from here on out, we're only getting power and provision changes, those playlists should be a great reference tool even long after I'm no longer making Gwent videos, especially since I made a point of playing as many factions and archetypes as we could, giving you a nice variety of decks to either play as is, or at least as a source of inspiration for your own decks. And while this may be the end of Gwent for me, you can still check out both our Thronebreaker and Rogue Mage playthroughs, which, in case you didn't know, are the single-player campaign and roguelike games respectively for Gwent. Thronebreaker in particular is extremely underrated, and I even went in blind, meaning I'd never seen anyone play and never looked up any guides for it, and never crafted a single card the entire playthrough. So we put our own unique spin on it. Other than that, we've done Witcher 1, 2, and 3 playthroughs, so you can check those out, or even Mass Effect, my favorite game, which is almost like The Witcher in the future in space, and Marduk RPG, my other favorite game, so this doesn't have to be the end. And while I may not be making any more Gwent videos, I still wish you all the best of luck in your matches, and with those those pesky Balance Council votes. So thank you all again, and good luck on the path.